You will keep your eyes down when the king arrives." The command came sharp and cold from Beta Marcus as he paced before the assembled Omegas in the courtyard. Kira stood in the back row, her fingers pressed against the hidden weight beneath her tunic, feeling the ancient metal warm against her ribs where she had bound it with cloth strips that morning. The blade always grew warm when danger approached, a peculiarity her mother had warned her about in fevered whispers during those final days. "Keep it hidden," her mother had said, her grip fierce despite the poison ravaging her body. "Keep it close. When the silver-eyed king comes, he will know. He will see what others cannot." Kira had been 12 then and had not understood. She was 23 now, and understood even less, except that the blade had burned against her skin every morning for the past week, ever since the messengers arrived announcing King Theron's visit to Blood Moon Pack for the alliance ceremonies. "The king honors us with his presence," Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the courtyard where autumn leaves scattered in the wind. "You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not raise your heads. You will certainly not embarrass this pack with your Omega inadequacies." Kira felt the familiar shame settle over her shoulders, like a cloak she had worn so long it had become part of her skin. Omega. Worthless. Invisible. These were the words that had defined her existence since her mother's death. Since Alpha Aldrich had seized their small cottage and declared that without her mother's healing skills, Kira had no value to offer the pack. She had been given a place in the Omega quarters, fed just enough to survive, worked until her hands bled in the kitchens and laundries, reminded daily that she existed on sufferance and should be grateful for even that. The blade beneath her tunic pulsed with heat, and Kira pressed her hand harder against it, willing it to stillness. She could not afford. Notice. Not today. Not ever. The Blood Moon Pack already whispered about her mother's strange knowledge, about the way Eleanor had always seemed to know things before they happened, about the old language she sometimes spoke when she thought no one listened. Witch, some called her, though never loud enough for Alpha Aldrich to hear. Eleanor had been too valuable, her healing too necessary, for the Alpha to allow such accusations. But now Eleanor was gone, and Kira had inherited only suspicion and a blade she could not explain, wrapped in a prophecy she did not understand. They are coming. The warning rippled through the assembled wolves as the sentry's howl echoed from the northern watchtowers. Kira felt her heart slam against her ribs, felt the blade burn hotter still. Around her, the other Omegas straightened, their fear palpable in the air. King Theron of the Northern Territories was not known for mercy. His reputation preceded him like winter wind, cold and absolute. He had unified the northern packs through strength and strategy, had defeated the Shadowborn incursion that had threatened all wolfkind 3 years ago, had executed traitors and rewarded loyalty with equal dispassion. He was called the Silver King for the color of his eyes and the silver that streaked his dark hair despite his young age, marks of the ancient power that ran in his bloodline. He was called other things too. Ruthless, brilliant, terrifying, unmated. That last detail had sent tremors through every pack with an unmated daughter of status. The alliance ceremonies were ostensibly about strengthening political bonds between packs, but everyone knew their true purpose. King Theron would choose a queen. Every eligible she-wolf of rank had been paraded before him at a dozen ceremonies over the past year, including Lady Seraphina of Blood Moon, Alpha Aldrich's niece, a woman of exceptional beauty and political cunning who had made no secret of her intention to claim the Aeon position at the king's side. Kira had served at Seraphina's table often enough to know the lady's ambitions, to see the calculations behind her perfect smiles. Seraphina wanted power the way wolves wanted air, and she would destroy anyone who stood between her and the throne. The sound of hoofbeats thundered closer, and then they appeared at the gates. The king's guard came first, 20 warriors in silver armor astride massive war horses, their discipline evident in their perfect formation. Behind them rode King Theron himself, and even with her eyes lowered as commanded, Kira felt the weight of his presence like pressure against her skin. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with the power that radiated from him. This was an alpha who needed no title to command submission. His authority was written in every molecule of the atmosphere, in the way the very earth seemed to steady itself beneath his horse's hooves. Alpha Aldrich. The king's voice carried across the courtyard. Deep and controlled, with an edge that suggested he saw far more than he revealed. Your hospitality is appreciated. The honor is ours, Your Majesty. Aldrich's response dripped with the obsequiousness he showed only to those more powerful than himself. Blood Moon Pack stands ready to serve. Kira kept her eyes fixed on the ground, watching the king's shadow move across the cobblestones as he dismounted. She could hear the measured cadence of his boots, could smell pine and winter air and something else, something that made her wolf stir for the first time in years. Her wolf had been silent since her mother's death, a ghost that barely acknowledged her existence. Omegas rarely had strong wolves, but now, impossibly, she felt it wake inside her, felt it lift its head and scent the air with sudden interest. No. She pushed the feeling down, forced her wolf back into submission. She could not afford this, could not afford to be noticed, to be different, to be anything but invisible. The blade against her ribs burned so hot now it was almost painful, but she did not dare move, did not dare draw attention to the way her hand pressed against her side. Your Majesty. Seraphina's voice rang out, honey smooth and perfectly pitched. Welcome to Blood Moon. We have prepared chambers for you and your guard, and tonight's feast will showcase our finest. Kira risked the smallest glance upward, and immediately regretted it. Lady Seraphina stood at the front of the assembled pack, resplendent in a gown of deep emerald that hugged her curves and set off the auburn of her hair. She was beautiful in the way of predators, all sharp edges and calculated grace, and she was looking at the king with an expression of carefully crafted desire mixed with deference, a look she had no doubt practiced in mirrors for months. But King Theron was not looking at Seraphina. His eyes, those legendary silver eyes that seemed to pierce through flesh and bone to see the truth beneath, were scanning the assembled pack, searching. And then they found Kira. Time stopped. The world narrowed to the point of connection between his gaze and hers, and in that instant, Kira saw recognition flash across his face. Not recognition of her. She was no one. Had never left Blood Moon territory. Had never been anyone he could possibly know. But recognition of something else. His eyes dropped to her hand pressed against her side, to the place where the blade lay hidden, and his expression shifted. Into something between shock and what might have been fear. You. The word was spoken quietly, but it carried across the courtyard with the weight of absolute command. Every head turned toward Kira. Every eye fixed on her with varying degrees of confusion and hostility. She felt the blood drain from her face, felt her legs turn to water beneath her. This was not possible. This could not be happening. Step forward. King Theron's voice allowed no disobedience. Kira's feet moved before her mind. Could process the command. Her body responding to the alpha authority in his tone, even as her thoughts screamed at her to run, to hide, to disappear into the earth itself. She walked forward on legs that trembled, past the other Omegas who shrank away from her as if her misfortune might be contagious, past Beta Marcus whose face had gone purple with rage at her presumption, past Lady Seraphina whose eyes had narrowed to green slits, filled with murderous calculation. She stopped 3 paces from the king as protocol demanded, her head bowed, her hand still pressed against the burning blade. Up close, his presence was overwhelming, a force that pressed against her from all sides. She could feel his power like electricity in the air, could smell cedar and night air, and something ancient that had no name. Her wolf whimpered inside her, torn between the instinct to submit and something else. Something that felt dangerously like recognition. Show me. 2 words. Simple. Undeniable. Kira's. Hands shook as she reached for the laces of her tunic. She could feel every eye on her, could hear the murmurs starting, could sense Beta Marcus moving forward to intervene. But King Theron raised one hand, and Marcus froze mid-step, held in place by nothing more than the king's will. The laces came free. Kira reached inside her tunic and pulled out the blade, still wrapped in its cloth binding. Even through the fabric it radiated heat now, pulsing like a living heartbeat. She unwrapped it, slowly, and gasps echoed across the courtyard as the metal caught the afternoon light. The blade was beautiful and terrible. Roughly the length of her forearm, it was forged from a metal that seemed to shift between silver and gold, depending on how the light struck it. Runes covered every inch of its surface, symbols from a language so old that Kira had never found mention of it in any of the pack's records. The hilt was wrapped in worn leather, shaped perfectly for her grip, as if it had been made for her hand alone. Her mother had told her it was called the Blood Moon Blade, though Kira had never understood if it was named for their pack or for something else entirely. Impossible, someone whispered. Kira did not look up to see who had spoken. She kept her eyes on the blade, watching the runes pulse with a faint inner light that they had never shown before. King Theron moved closer, and Kira forced herself to remain still, even though every instinct screamed at her to step back. Reached out slowly, carefully, and when his fingers touched the blade's surface, light exploded outward. Kira cried out, nearly dropping the weapon as power surged through her, through the blade, through the point of connection, where the king's skin met the ancient metal. The runes blazed brilliant gold, and for one impossible moment, she saw. She saw a battlefield under a blood-red moon. She saw a woman who wore her face but was not her, standing back to back with a man who had silver eyes, both of them fighting against shadows that sought to swallow the world. She saw a throne room where that same woman was crowned, the blood moon blade held high as thousands of wolves howled their allegiance. She saw a prophecy written in starlight across a night sky. When the blood moon rises and the Silver King wakes, the Luna Queen will come bearing the blade of fate. Only she can wield it. Only she can unite what was broken. Only she can stand between the light and the darkness that hungers too. Devour all. The vision shattered. Kira stumbled backward, gasping, and would have fallen if King Theron had not caught her arm. His grip was firm but careful, and when she finally dared to look up at him, she found his silver eyes boring into hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "What is your name?" His voice was softer now, though no less commanding. "Kira." Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Kira Ashford, Your Majesty." "Ashford." He repeated the name as if testing it, and something flickered in his expression. "Eleanor's daughter." It was not a question. Kira nodded, too shocked to wonder how he knew her mother's name. Around them, the courtyard had erupted into chaos. Alpha Aldrich was shouting something about protocol and presumption. Lady Seraphina's face had gone white with fury. Beta Marcus was demanding that Kira be seized for carrying a forbidden weapon. But King Theron ignored them all. "Where did you get this blade?" "My mother gave it to me before she died." Kira's voice steadied slightly as she spoke of Eleanor. Whatever else was happening, whatever impossibility she had stumbled into, her mother had prepared her for this moment, even if Kira had not understood. She said it was my inheritance. She said when the silver-eyed king came, he would know what it meant. "Your Majesty?" Lady Seraphina's voice cut through the noise, sharp with barely controlled anger. "Surely there has been some mistake. This Omega cannot possibly be anyone of significance. The girl is nobody, a servant, the daughter of a healer who dabbled in forbidden arts. Whatever weapon she carries, it must be a forgery, a trick." King Theron turned to look at Seraphina, and Kira saw the lady take an involuntary step back from the ice in his gaze. "Are you questioning my judgment, Lady Seraphina?" "No, Your Majesty. Of course not." Seraphina's recovery was swift, her expression shifting to concern touched with confusion. "I merely wish to protect you from deception. This girl has always been strange, secretive. Her mother filled her head with wild stories. It would not surprise me if this is some elaborate scheme to gain your attention. My attention is not so easily gained." The king's words carried a warning that made several wolves drop their gazes. He turned back to Kira, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "But neither is this blade a forgery. I have seen it before, In the ancient texts, in the prophecies my family has guarded, for 1,000 years, the blood moon blade was forged by the first Luna Queen, blessed by the moon goddess herself, and lost when the Ashford line was hunted to extinction 3 centuries ago. The silence that fell over the courtyard was absolute. Kira felt the weight of every stare, felt the shift in the air as understanding and disbelief warred in the faces around her. Ashford line, hunted to extinction. Her mother had never spoken of their ancestry beyond vague references to old blood and older debts. "That is impossible," Alpha Aldrich sputtered, though his voice had lost its certainty. "The Ashfords were eliminated, every last one. The records are clear." Apparently not clear enough. King Theron's voice was dry. He looked at Kira again, and she saw something in his eyes that might have been apology, or perhaps recognition of the burden he was about to place on her shoulders. The blade cannot be wielded by anyone of impure bloodline. The runes themselves would burn through. Flesh and bone. Yet Kira holds it as if it were made for her hand, because it was. The Blood Moon blade responds only to the true heir of the Ashford line, to the Luna Queen foretold in prophecy. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. "This is madness." Lady Seraphina's voice rose, losing its careful control. "You cannot seriously be suggesting that this Omega, this nobody, is somehow royalty? That she is the prophesied queen? Your Majesty, I beg you to consider the political implications. Blood Moon Pack has served faithfully. My uncle has prepared for your arrival for months. I have been groomed since childhood to stand at your side. This girl is nothing. This girl," King Theron said quietly, dangerously, "is under my protection as of this moment. Anyone who seeks to harm her, to undermine her, or to treat her with anything less than the respect due to her bloodline will answer to me. Personally." The threat was unmistakable. Alpha Aldrich's face had gone from purple to ashen. Beta Marcus looked as if he might be sick. And Lady Seraphina, beautiful, ambitious Lady Seraphina, wore an expression of such hatred that Kira felt a chill run down her spine. This was not over. This was only beginning. "Kira Ashford," King Theron said, and the formal use of her full name made her focus on him again. "I invoke the right of recognition. By the authority granted to me as Alpha King of the Northern Territories and Guardian of the Ancient Covenants, I claim you under my protection and demand that you be given the honor and treatment befitting your bloodline until such time as your heritage can be fully verified and your destiny fulfilled." It was the most formal declaration Kira had ever heard, and she had no idea how to respond. Protocol demanded she kneel, but her legs would not obey. She stood frozen, the blade still held in her trembling hand, staring at the man who had just upended her entire existence with a handful of words. Her voice failed. She tried again. "I do not understand, Your Majesty. I am nobody. I have always been nobody. How can I be what you say?" Something softened in his expression. Something that looked almost like compassion. "You are who you have always been, Kira. The world simply failed to recognize it. But your blood knows. Your blade knows. And I know." He turned to address Alpha Aldrich, though his hand remained on Kira's arm. Gesture of protection and possession that did not go unnoticed by anyone present. "I will require private chambers for Kira, befitting her station. She will need appropriate clothing, attendants, and guards. I will also require access to any records your pack has regarding the Ashford family, as well as any documentation of Eleanor Ashford's time here." "Of course, Your Majesty." Aldrich's agreement came through gritted teeth. "Though I must confess, we have little information. Eleanor came to us 24 years ago, already carrying the child. She offered her healing services in exchange for sanctuary. We knew nothing of her background beyond her skills. She was running," King Theron said, though whether he was speaking to Aldrich or to himself was unclear. "Hiding. Protecting the last of the bloodline." He looked down at Kira again. Your mother was very brave and very careful. She kept you alive when others would have seen you dead in your cradle. The words settled over Kira like a weight, dead in her cradle. Because of blood she had not asked for, a heritage she had never claimed, a prophecy she did not understand. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why would anyone want me dead? Why was my family hunted? What did we do? What you did, King Theron said quietly, was stand between tyranny and the Pax. 300 years ago, when the Shadow King rose and sought to enslave all wolf-kind under his rule, it was Luna Queen Lyanna Ashford who led the resistance. She and her mate, Alpha King Aldeon, fought a war that lasted 20 years and cost countless lives. They won, but at a terrible price. The Shadow King was defeated, but not destroyed, merely banished to the void between worlds. And before he fell, he cursed the Ashford line, swearing that he would return when the bloodline was extinct, when there was no Luna Queen to stand against him. The courtyard had gone deathly silent. Even Kira, who had lived her whole life ignorant of these histories, felt the weight of the story, the truth of it resonating in her bones. The Shadow King's followers, Theron continued, hunted the Ashfords relentlessly. One by one, the line dwindled. A century ago, we believed the last had fallen. But Eleanor survived, hidden by allies, protected by those who still believed in the prophecy. She lived long enough to birth you and to pass you the blade that cannot be destroyed, cannot be stolen, and cannot be wielded by any hand but the true heirs. He paused, his silver eyes holding Kira's with an intensity that made her breathless. The signs are all around us. The shadow creatures that have been appearing at the borders of our territories. The darkness that has been spreading through the spirit realm, the way the moon's light has been waning these past years. The Shadow King is returning, Kira, and you are the only one who can stop him. The world tilted. Kira felt the ground sway beneath her feet, felt her vision narrow to a tunnel. This could not be real, could not be happening. She was a nobody, an Omega, a girl who scrubbed floors and kept her head down and dreamed of nothing more than surviving another day. She was not a queen. She was not a savior. She was not whatever this prophecy demanded her to be. I cannot, she whispered. Your Majesty, I cannot. You have made a mistake. I am weak. I have no training, no power. My wolf barely speaks to me. I am not what you need. You are exactly what I need. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. The blade would not have chosen you otherwise. Your blood would not sing with power if you were truly as powerless as you believe. You have been suppressed, Kira, held down, and made small by those who feared what you might become. But that ends now. He raised his voice to address the assembled pack. Kira Ashford is under the protection of the crown. Anyone who wishes to challenge this, step forward now. No one moved. Even Lady Seraphina, for all her fury, was not foolish enough to directly oppose the Alpha King. But Kira could feel the hostility radiating from multiple directions, could sense the plots already forming in minds that saw her as a threat or an obstacle. She had gone from invisible to the most dangerous person in the pack in the span of minutes, and she had no idea how to survive what came next. Come, King Theron said, his tone gentling slightly. You look ready to collapse. We will speak more when you have had time to process this. But understand, Kira, whether you feel ready or not, your destiny has found you. The only question now is whether you will rise to meet it. He guided her toward the castle, his hand still on her arm, his presence a shield against the stares and whispers that followed them. Kira clutched the blade to her chest, feeling its warmth pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, and wondered if she had just been saved or condemned. The chambers they gave Kira had once belonged to Alpha Aldrich's deceased mate, a fact that was not lost on anyone. They were beautiful in a way that felt like mockery, all silk hangings and polished wood and windows that overlooked the forest. Kira stood in the center of the room, still wearing her simple Omega tunic, still clutching the blade, and felt more lost than she had ever felt in her life. A knock sounded at the door, and before she could answer, it opened to admit 2 women. One was elderly, her hair silver and her eyes kind, despite the wariness in their depths. The other was young, perhaps Kira's age, with nervous hands and a gentle expression. Miss Ashford, the older woman said, her use of the title both strange and somehow right. I am Marta, and this is Lyra. The king has assigned us as your attendants. We are here to help you prepare for tonight's feast. I cannot go to the feast, Kira said immediately. I do not belong there. I do not even know how to behave at a formal dinner. Then we will teach you, Marta said simply. She moved into the room with the confidence of someone who had served nobility before. The king has commanded your presence at his side. You will attend. At his side. The words made Kira's heart stutter. Lady Seraphina will be there. Lady Seraphina will have to accept the new reality, just as we all must. Marta's voice was neutral, but Kira caught a flicker of something in her expression. Perhaps sympathy, perhaps calculation. It was impossible to tell who could be trusted in this new world. Kira had been thrust into. Lyra approached carefully, her hands outstretched. May I take the blade, miss? We need to help you bathe and dress, and it will be safer if we secure the weapon properly. Every instinct in Kira screamed against letting the blade leave her possession. But Lyra's expression was so earnest, so free of guile, that Kira found herself slowly extending the weapon. The moment Lyra's fingers touched the hilt, the girl gasped and jerked back, cradling her hand. It burned me, she whispered, staring at the red mark already forming on her palm. Marta moved forward quickly, examining Lyra's injury with experienced eyes. Then both women looked at Kira with new expressions, something between fear and awe. The king spoke truth, Marta murmured. The blade recognizes only you. Kira looked down at the weapon in her hand, at the runes that still pulsed with faint golden light. She thought of her mother's words, of the vision she had seen when King Theron touched the blade, of the prophecy that demanded she become someone she did not know how to be. I do not know what I am doing, she admitted quietly. None of us do at first, Marta said, her voice kind. But we learn. And you have already survived more than most. You are still standing, still breathing. That is enough for today. Tomorrow, you will learn what you need for tomorrow. It was practical wisdom, the kind Eleanor might have offered. And Kira felt a pang of grief so sharp, it stole her breath. Mother had died without telling her the truth, without preparing her for any of this. Or perhaps Eleanor had prepared her as best she could, teaching her to be invisible, to survive, to endure. Perhaps those skills were exactly what Kira would need in the days ahead. She let Marta and Lyra lead her to the bathing chamber, though she kept the blade with her, setting it carefully on a table within arm's reach. The hot water was a luxury she had not experienced in years, and despite everything, Kira felt some of the tension ease from her muscles as she sank into the carved wooden tub. Lyra washed her hair with gentle hands, using soaps that smelled of lavender and rosemary, while Marta bustled about selecting clothing from a wardrobe that had been hastily filled with gowns in Kira's size. How they had managed it so quickly, Kira did not know. Perhaps the king traveled with seamstresses. Perhaps these were gowns that had been intended for Lady Seraphina. Perhaps this was all still a dream, and she would wake in her narrow cot in the Omega quarters, cold and hungry and invisible once more. The king is not married, Lyra said suddenly, then blushed at her own boldness. I am sorry, miss. That was inappropriate. It is fine, Kira said, though her heart had started racing again. I do not understand his interest. He could have any she-wolf in the kingdom. Why would he claim me as anything other than a curiosity? Because the prophecy names you, Marta said from the doorway. She held a gown of deep midnight blue, simple in design, but clearly expensive in fabric. Because the blade chose you. Because, if the old stories are true, the Luna Queen and the Silver King are fated mates, bound by destiny and the will of the moon goddess herself. Fated mates. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Kira had dreamed of finding her fated mate once, years ago, before life had taught her that Omegas did not get such gifts. The mate bond was rare, precious, and typically reserved for wolves of power and status. It was not for girls who scrubbed floors and tried not to exist. "That is just a story," Kira said, but her voice lacked conviction. After everything that had happened today, who was she to say what was story and what was truth? "The king believes it," Marta replied, "and King Theron is not a man given to flights of fancy. If he has claimed you under his protection, if he has invoked the right of recognition, then he has seen something in you. That confirms the prophecy. The question is not whether you are who he says you are. The question is whether you will accept it." Kira climbed from the bath, letting Lyra wrap her in a towel that was softer than anything she had ever felt. She looked at herself in the mirror. Really looked. Perhaps for the first time in years. She saw a young woman, thin from too little food and too much work, with dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders when it was clean and combed. She saw eyes the color of amber. Her mother's eyes, wide with fear and confusion, but not entirely without strength. She saw the faint scars on her hands from years of hard labor, the hollow of her cheeks, the tension in her shoulders. She did not look like a queen. But perhaps, she thought, as she let Marta help her into the midnight blue gown, perhaps queens were not born looking the part. Perhaps they were forged from girls who had learned to survive impossible things. The gown fit perfectly, hugging her curves, and falling to the floor in elegant folds. Lyra arranged her hair, leaving it mostly loose, but weaving small braids decorated with silver beads through the strands. Marta fastened a simple silver circlet around Kira's brow, nothing ornate but enough to mark her as someone of significance. When they were finished, Kira barely recognized herself. "Beautiful," Lyra breathed. "The king will not be able to look away. The king needs to look away," Kira muttered. But she could not deny the flutter of something in her chest. Fear, certainly. But also, dangerously, a thread of hope. What if this was real? What if she truly was meant for something more than the life she had been living? What if her mother's death and her years of suffering had led to this moment, this chance to become someone who mattered? A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts, and the door opened without waiting for permission. Beta Marcus stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous. "The king requires your presence in the great hall," he said, his voice dripping with resentment. "You are to sit at his right hand. Do try not to embarrass us all with your Omega ignorance." Kira felt Marta stiffen beside her, felt her own temper flare in response to the deliberate insult. But before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Beta Marcus. King Theron appeared behind Marcus, his presence immediately dominating the space. "I believe I gave explicit instructions that Kira was to be treated with respect. Your tone suggests you have forgotten those instructions." Marcus paled but did not back down entirely. "Your Majesty, I meant no disrespect. I merely seek to remind the girl of the importance of tonight's gathering. Many powerful wolves will be present. We cannot afford missteps." "The only misstep I see is yours," Theron said coldly. "You are dismissed. I will escort Kira myself." Marcus opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, then seemed to think better of it. He bowed stiffly and retreated, though the hatred in his eyes as he glanced at Kira promised future trouble. King Theron stepped into the room, and Kira felt her breath catch. He had changed from his travel clothes into formal attire, a tunic of deep charcoal accented with silver that emphasized his broad shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. His dark hair was pushed back from his face, revealing the striking angles of his features and those silver eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the genuine appreciation in his voice made Kira's cheeks heat. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she managed. "You do not need to call me that when we are private," he said, moving closer. "My name is Theron. I would like you to use it." "That would not be appropriate," Kira protested. "I am far below your station." "You are my equal," he corrected gently. Or you will be once you fully embrace what you are. But I will not force familiarity. Call me what feels comfortable, Kira. The use of her given name, spoken in that deep voice, sent shivers down her spine. She clutched the blade, which she had insisted on keeping with her, and tried to steady herself. I do not know how to do this, she admitted. I do not know how to walk into that hall and pretend I belong there. Everyone will know I am a fraud. You are not a fraud. Theron reached out and tilted her chin up with gentle fingers, forcing her to meet his eyes. You are exactly who the prophecy says you are. The blade proves it. Your blood proves it. And I will be beside you every moment. You are not alone in this, Kira. I swear it. The sincerity in his voice made her want to believe him, made her want to trust that this impossible situation might somehow work out. But she had learned long ago that wanting something did not make it true. Why? She asked suddenly. Why do you care? If the prophecy is real, if I truly am this Luna Queen, then surely I am just a tool to you, a weapon to wield against the Shadow King. Why bother with kindness? Something flickered in Theron's expression, something that looked like pain. Because I know what it is to be used, he said quietly. I have been the Silver King since I was 16, since my father died defending the northern border. I have spent 12 years making decisions that cost lives, bearing responsibilities I never asked for, being what everyone needed me to be, rather than what I might have chosen. I will not do that to you. Kira, I will not make you a tool or a weapon. Whatever you become, it will be your choice. The honesty in his words struck something deep in Kira's chest. This was not what she had expected from the legendary Alpha King. This vulnerability mixed with strength. I am afraid, she confessed. I am terrified that I will fail, that I will let everyone down, that I will die because I am not strong enough, or smart enough, or whatever enough to be what you need. Then we will be afraid together, Theron said, and the corner of his mouth lifted in the smallest smile. Because I am equally terrified that I will fail to protect you, that I will not be able to teach you what you need to know, that I will lose you before we even have a chance to discover what we might be to each other. What we might be to each other. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Kira felt the mate bond pull, faint but present, a thread connecting her heart to his. She had never felt anything like it. Before, this sense of recognition, of rightness, as if her soul had been waiting for this moment without her conscious knowledge. Is it real? She whispered. The mate bond? Do you feel it too? Yes. No hesitation, no doubt. I have felt it since the moment I saw you. The prophecy spoke of it, but I did not truly understand until today. You are mine, Kira Ashford, and I am yours, if you will have me. If you will have me. As if she had a choice. As if a nobody Omega could refuse the Alpha. But when Kira looked into Theron's eyes, she saw something that suggested he truly meant it. That he would honor her choice, whatever it might be. I do not know how to be anyone's, she said honestly. I have been alone so long. Then we will learn together, Theron replied. He offered his arm, formal and courteous. Come, let us face the wolves together. And remember, you carry the Blood Moon blade. You are descended from the Luna Queen who saved all wolfkind. That blood runs in your veins. Kira, let them see it. Kira took his arm, feeling the solid strength of him, the warmth that radiated through the fabric of his tunic. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and let him lead her from the chamber toward whatever awaited in the great hall. The corridor seemed to stretch forever, each step bringing them closer to the moment when Kira would have to face the pack that had dismissed her as worthless for so long. She could hear the noise from the great hall, the sound of dozens of voices raised in conversation and laughter, the clink of glasses, and the rustle of fine clothing. At the entrance, Theron paused and looked down at her. Ready? No, Kira thought. I will never be ready. But she nodded anyway, because what choice did she have? Good. Theron's hand covered hers on his arm, a gesture of solidarity. Remember, you are under my protection. No one will dare harm you while I stand beside you. The doors swung open, and a herald's voice rang out across the suddenly silent hall. His Majesty, King Theron of the Northern Territories, and Lady Kira Ashford of the Blood Moon line. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye turned toward them, and Kira felt the weight of those stares like physical blows. She saw Alpha Aldrich at the head table, his face carefully neutral, but his eyes calculating. She saw Lady Seraphina beside him, resplendent in a gown of crimson silk, her expression a mask of polite interest that did not quite hide the fury. Beneath, she saw Beta Marcus, other high-ranking wolves, servants she had worked alongside for years, now staring at her with varying degrees of shock and resentment. And she saw the King's Guard, 20 warriors who had positioned themselves strategically around the hall, their hands never far from their weapons, their eyes alert for any threat to their king or to the woman he had claimed as his own. Theron led her through the hall with unhurried confidence, his bearing regal and unshakable. Kira focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on breathing, on not tripping over the unfamiliar gown. They reached the head table, and Theron pulled out a chair for her, the one directly to his right, the position traditionally reserved for the highest-ranking female present. Lady Seraphina's position. Seraphina's smile did not waver, but Kira saw her hands clench briefly before she relaxed them. "Your Majesty," Seraphina said, her voice honey-sweet. "What an unexpected arrangement. I was under the impression I would have the honor of sitting beside you tonight. Plans change," Theron said mildly as he took his own seat. "I am certain you understand, Lady Seraphina. Circumstances have necessitated a new protocol." "Of course." Seraphina's eyes slid to Kira, and the malice in them was unmistakable despite her pleasant expression. "Welcome, Kira. How overwhelming this must all be for you. I do hope you will not feel out of place among those of us who are accustomed to such gatherings." The insult was delicate but clear. Kira felt heat rise in her cheeks, felt the old shame trying to reassert itself. But then she felt Theron's hand find hers beneath the table, felt the warmth of his palm against hers, and something in her steadied. "I appreciate your concern, Lady Seraphina," Kira said, keeping her voice level. "But I find that adaptability is one of my strengths. I have learned to be comfortable in many situations." It was not much of a retort, but it was more than Kira would have dared a day ago. Seraphina's smile tightened fractionally before she turned her attention to Alpha Aldrich, engaging him in conversation about hunting prospects for the coming winter. "What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below." The feast began with a procession of dishes that Kira had often prepared herself, working long hours in the kitchens to create meals she would never taste. Now she sat at the high table, expected to navigate. Silverware she had polished but never used, to make conversation with wolves who had never acknowledged her existence. It was surreal and terrifying, and she found herself relying heavily on observation, watching how others ate and drank and spoke, mimicking their behaviors as best she could. Theron was a steady presence beside her, occasionally murmuring quiet guidance, pointing out which fork to use, explaining the significance of certain toasts. His patience and discretion made Kira's throat tight with gratitude. He could have left her to flounder, could have used her ignorance to demonstrate why she did not belong in this world. Instead, he helped her navigate it, his support unwavering. "You are doing well," he said quietly, his voice meant only for her ears. "Better than I did at my first formal dinner. I used the finger bowl as a soup course and my father nearly had an apoplexy." The image was so unexpected that Kira found herself smiling despite her nerves. "Truly?" "Truly." His eyes held warmth and understanding. "We all stumble, Kira. The key is to keep walking forward." Before Kira could respond, a commotion at the far end of the hall drew everyone's attention. A messenger had entered, his clothes dusty from hard travel, his expression urgent. He made his way quickly to the high table and bowed deeply before King Theron. "Your Majesty, I bring news from the eastern border. It is urgent." Theron's expression shifted immediately to one of focused intensity. "Speak. Shadow creatures, Your Majesty. A dozen of them appeared at the Silverwood border 2 nights ago. They attacked a patrol, killed 3 wolves before the rest could drive them back. But that is not the worst of it." The messenger hesitated, his eyes flickering briefly to Kira before returning to the king. "They spoke, Your Majesty. Shadow creatures have never been known to speak before, but these did. They said to tell the Silver King that the time of prophecy draws near, that the veil grows thin, and that no Luna Queen will save us this time. They said the Shadow King remembers, and he is coming." The hall erupted into noise, wolves shouting questions and concerns, the careful veneer of the formal dinner shattering. But Kira barely heard any of it. Her attention was fixed on the blade at her side, which had grown suddenly cold. So cold it was almost painful even through the leather sheath Marta had fashioned for it. Theron stood, his movement commanding immediate silence. "When did this attack occur?" 2 nights ago, Your Majesty. I rode without stopping to bring you the news." "You have done well." Theron's voice was grim. He turned to his captain of the guard. "Prepare the men. We ride for Silverwood at first light. If the shadow creatures are growing bold enough to speak and to linger after attacks, then the situation is worse than we feared. Your Majesty." Alpha Aldrich rose as well, his expression troubled. "If you will permit, Blood Moon warriors stand ready to accompany you. These shadow creatures threaten all our territories." "Your offer is appreciated and accepted," Theron replied. He looked down at Kira, and she saw the conflict in his eyes. "I must go. The eastern border cannot be left vulnerable while we wait to understand the full extent of the threat." "I am coming with you," Kira said, the words emerging before she had fully thought them through. The idea of being left behind, of facing Lady Seraphina and the hostile Blood Moon wolves, without Theron's protection, was unbearable. But more than that, some instinct told her that she needed to see the shadow creatures for herself, needed to understand the enemy that the prophecy claimed only she could defeat. "Absolutely not," Theron said immediately. "It is too dangerous." "I am the one the prophecy speaks of," Kira countered, finding courage from somewhere deep inside. "I am the Luna Queen, or I am supposed to be. How can I learn to be what you need if I hide away from the very thing I am meant to fight?" "She has a point, Your Majesty." One of the king's advisors spoke up, an older wolf named Gareth, who had been introduced to Kira earlier. "If the shadow creatures are already speaking of her, then they know of her existence. Hiding her will not make her safer. And if the prophecy is true, she may need to see them, to understand them." "It is too soon," Theron argued, though Kira could see him wavering. "She has no training, no control of her powers. We do not even know if her wolf is strong enough to defend her if attacked." "Then I will learn," Kira said firmly. "I have to start somewhere, Your Majesty. And I would rather be beside you, where I can see what is happening, than left behind to wonder and worry." Their eyes met and held, and Kira saw the moment Theron accepted the logic of her argument, even as he hated it. "You will stay close to me at all times," he said finally. "You will obey my commands without question if we encounter danger. And you will begin combat training immediately, starting tonight. If you are coming into battle, you will do so with at least the basic skills to defend yourself." "Agreed," Kira said, relief flooding through her. Lady Seraphina rose gracefully, her expression one of concern that might have been convincing if Kira had not seen the calculation behind it. "Your Majesty, if I may, perhaps it would be wise if I accompanied you as well. I have some small skill with healing herbs, and my presence might help. Ease tensions with the border packs who know me. Additionally, I could assist in chaperoning Lady Kira, as propriety would suggest she not travel alone with your guard." The offer was smooth, reasonable, and completely transparent. Seraphina wanted to remain close to Theron, wanted to undermine whatever was developing between him and Kira, wanted to ensure that she did not lose her position as his intended queen without a fight. Theron's expression was unreadable, Your offer is noted, lady. Seraphina, I will consider it and provide my answer before we depart. It was neither acceptance nor rejection, and Seraphina was too politically savvy to push further in public. She inclined her head gracefully and resumed her seat, but her eyes when they met Kira's were full of promise. This was not over, not by a long shot. The feast continued, but the mood had shifted from celebration to tension. Wolves spoke in low voices about the shadow creature attack, about what it meant, about whether the ancient evil truly was returning as the prophecy had warned. Kira felt their fear like a living thing in the air, and beneath it, she felt their resentment toward her. She was the symbol of this threat, the reminder that their world was changing in ways they did not understand and could not control. When the meal finally ended and Theron escorted her back to her chambers, Kira felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical labor. You did well tonight, Theron said, as they paused outside her door. I know it was difficult. Everyone hates me, Kira said flatly. They see me as an interloper, a threat, or worse, a fraud. Even your own advisors look at me with doubt. They will come to accept you, Theron said, though his tone suggested he was not entirely convinced. Give them time. We may not have time. Kira touched the blade at her side, feeling its unnatural cold. If the shadow creatures are already active, if the Shadow King is truly returning, then whatever the prophecy requires of me needs to happen soon, and I am nowhere near ready. Then we will make you ready. Theron's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite the strength in his fingers. I meant what I said earlier, Kira. You are not alone in this. Whatever you need to become the Luna Queen, whatever training or knowledge or support, I will provide it. I will stand beside you. The sincerity in his voice made Kira's eyes burn with unshed tears. She had been alone for so long, had learned to rely only on herself, had built walls around her heart to keep out the pain of rejection and loss. But Theron was offering her something she had not dared to hope for. Partnership, protection, perhaps even more. Why me? She whispered. Of all the she-wolves in your kingdom, why does the prophecy name me? I am nothing special, Theron. I have no great strength or wisdom. I am just a girl who survived because she learned to be invisible. You survived, Theron said, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Because you are stronger than you know. You survived years of mistreatment and never lost your kindness. You survived grief and loss and never became bitter. You survived being made to feel worthless without believing it in your heart. That is the strength the prophecy saw in you, Kira. Not power or status, but an unbreakable core that refused to be destroyed, no matter how hard the world tried. The words broke something open inside Kira, some dam that had been holding back years of pain and doubt. Tears spilled over, tracking down her cheeks, and she was mortified by her own weakness. But Theron did not pull away. Instead, he drew her into his arms, letting her cry against his chest, his hand stroking her hair with infinite patience. I am sorry, she gasped when the tears finally subsided. I am sorry. I should be stronger. You are strong enough to let yourself feel, Theron said quietly. That is a different kind of strength, but no less important. Cry if you need to, Kira. Rage if it helps. Be vulnerable with me. I will keep you safe while you do. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Kira pulled back slightly, looking up at him through tear-wet lashes. In the dim light of the corridor, his silver eyes seemed to glow with an inner fire, and the connection between them, that thread of fate that bound them together, pulled taut. She felt it in her chest, in her soul, a recognition that went beyond words or logic. This man was hers, and she was his. Destined or not, prophecy or not, the bond was real. Kiss me, she whispered, the words escaping before she could second-guess them. Theron went very still. Kira, you have been through so much today. I do not want to take advantage of your emotional state. You are not taking advantage, she insisted. I am asking. I am choosing. For once in my life, I am choosing something for myself, and I choose this. You. I choose, please. For another long moment, Theron simply looked at her, his eyes searching hers for any hint of doubt or coercion. Then, finding only honesty and desire, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, a soft brush of lips that sent sparks racing through Kira's entire body. But when she made a small sound of pleasure and pressed closer, the kiss deepened, became something hungry and claiming. Theron's arms tightened around her, and Kira felt his wolf rise to meet hers. Felt the mate bond flare bright and hot between them. Her wolf, silent for so long, surged to life inside her, stronger than Kira had ever felt it, crying out in recognition and joy. Mine. Ours. Mate. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kira felt fundamentally changed. The world had shifted on its axis, and she was no longer the person she had been that morning. That was... Theron paused, seeming to search for words. That was everything. Yes, Kira agreed softly. She touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss. Theron, I felt my wolf, really felt her, strong and clear. She recognized you, as mine recognized you. Theron's voice was rough with emotion. The mate bond is complete, Kira. You are mine in every way that matters, before the moon goddess and the ancestors. When we return from the border, when you have had time to understand what this means, I will ask you properly. I will court you as you deserve. But know this, from this moment forward, I will let nothing and no one harm you. It was a vow, spoken with absolute conviction, and Kira felt the weight of it settle over her like a mantle. She was no longer alone, no longer unprotected, no longer invisible. I should let you rest, Theron said reluctantly, though his hands remained on her waist, as if he could not quite bring himself to let go. We have a long journey tomorrow, and you will need your strength. Will you truly make me train tonight? Kira asked, remembering his earlier declaration. Theron's mouth curved in a slight smile. Perhaps we can start tomorrow night instead. You have been through enough for one day, but tomorrow, I promise, we begin your education in earnest. Combat, politics, pack dynamics, everything you will need to know. It sounds exhausting, Kira admitted. It will be, Theron agreed. But I believe you are equal to it. Sleep now, Kira. I will have guards posted outside your door. Wolves I trust absolutely. You are safe here. He kissed her. Forehead gently, a benediction, then stepped back. Kira watched him walk away down the corridor, his bearing as regal and controlled as ever, despite what had just passed between them. When he disappeared around the corner, she finally entered her chambers and closed the door, leaning back against it with a sigh. The room was dark, except for the moonlight streaming through the windows. Kira moved to look out over the forest, the blade still at her side, its cold weight a reminder of everything that had changed. Somewhere out there, shadow creatures gathered. The Shadow King prepared his return, and she, Kira Ashford, Omega and Orphan, had been named as the only one who could stop him. It should have terrified her. And it did. But beneath the fear, Kira felt something else growing. Purpose. Determination. The knowledge that she was not the helpless girl she had believed herself to be. She touched the window glass, feeling the cold against her palm, and made a silent vow to the moon, goddess whose light bathed the world below. She would learn. She would grow stronger. She would become the Luna Queen the prophecy demanded, not for destiny or duty, but because she refused to let the people she was coming to care about face the darkness alone. And because the man who had claimed her as his mate, who had looked at her with respect and desire and understanding, deserved a partner who could stand beside him, not cower behind him. I will not fail you, Kira whispered to the night. To Theron, to herself. I will not fail. Dawn came too quickly. Kira woke to find Marta and Lyra already in her chambers, laying out traveling clothes and packing supplies with efficient hands. The midnight blue gown had been replaced with practical leather pants and a tunic, sturdy boots, and a cloak that would provide protection against wind and weather. "The king sent these," Marta said, indicating the clothes. "He was quite specific about your comfort and safety." As Kira dressed, she noticed that the clothing fit perfectly, that every piece had been chosen with care. The tunic even had a special sheath built into it for the blood moon blade, allowing her to carry it close to her body without it being obviously displayed. Small considerations that spoke of thoughtfulness and attention to detail. When she emerged from her chambers, she found Theron waiting in the corridor, already dressed for travel in dark leather and silver-chased armor. He looked every inch the warrior king, dangerous and competent, and Kira felt her breath catch at the sight of him. "Good morning," he said, his eyes warming as they took her in. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough," Kira lied. She had spent half the night alternating between replaying their kiss and worrying about what lay ahead. "Liar," Theron said mildly, but there was affection in his tone. "Your eyes have shadows beneath them. But we can discuss proper sleep schedules later. For now, we need to move. The shadow creatures are not known for their patience." The courtyard was chaos, filled with warriors preparing horses and checking weapons, supplies being loaded onto pack animals, orders being shouted across the space. Kira saw Lady Seraphina standing near her own mount, dressed in traveling leathers that somehow managed to look both practical and elegant. The lady caught Kira's eye and smiled, a sharp expression that promised trouble. "Lady Kira," Seraphina called out, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "I do hope you are comfortable with horses. The journey to Silverwood is long and quite arduous for those unaccustomed to such travel." It was another delicate insult, a reminder that Kira had never traveled beyond Blood Moon territory, had never ridden for anything more than short trips to gather herbs in the forest. But before Kira could formulate a response, Theron stepped close to her side. "Kira will ride with me," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "It will allow me to brief her on what to expect at the border and ensure her safety on the journey." Seraphina's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Of course, Your Majesty. How thoughtful of you to provide such personal attention." The words were innocent enough, but the implication was clear. By having Kira ride with him, Theron was making a public declaration of his favor and protection, a statement that would not go unnoticed by anyone present. It was a political move as much as a practical one, and Kira found herself grateful for his support, even as she worried about the resentment it would generate. Theron led her to a massive war horse, a gray stallion that stood at least 18 hands high and looked as if it could crush her with one hoof. "This is Tempest," Theron said, stroking the horse's neck with obvious affection. "He is my primary mount and has carried me through more battles than I care to count. He will keep you safe." "He is magnificent," Kira said honestly, though she felt a flutter of nerves at the prospect of riding such a powerful animal. "And terrifying. A healthy combination," Theron agreed, with a slight smile. He mounted in one fluid movement, then reached down to help Kira up. She placed her foot in the stirrup and let him pull her up behind him, settling into the saddle with her arms wrapped around his waist. The position was intimate. Her body pressed against his back, her face level with his shoulder. She could smell leather and pine and the scent that was uniquely Theron, and despite the circumstances, she felt a flutter of warmth in her chest. "Comfortable?" Theron asked, glancing back at her. "Yes," Kira said, tightening her grip slightly. "This is actually rather nice." She felt his chuckle more than heard it, a vibration through his back. "Hold on tight. Tempest moves fast when we need him to." The signal was given, and the entire company began to move, flowing out of the courtyard and through Blood Moon territory toward the eastern border. They traveled in formation, with Theron and his personal guard at the center, surrounded by rings of warriors from both his own forces and the Blood Moon volunteers. It was an impressive display of strength and organization, and Kira felt a sense of security despite the danger they were riding toward. As they rode, Theron spoke quietly, educating Kira about what they might face. Shadow creatures are not natural beings, he explained. They are manifestations of dark magic, fragments of the shadow. King's power given form and purpose. They cannot be killed in the traditional sense, only dispersed and sent back to the void. Silver wounds them more effectively than steel, and fire is their weakness. But the most important thing is that they feed on fear. They sense it, amplify it, use it to paralyze their victims. How do you fight something that feeds on fear? Kira asked, troubled by the concept. By mastering your fear, Theron replied. Not eliminating it, that is impossible for anyone. With sense, but acknowledging it and refusing to let it control you. It is one of the first lessons you will learn in combat training. Fear is information, not instruction. Kira absorbed this, tucking it away to examine later. The journey continued through the day, with brief stops to rest the horses and allow the warriors to eat. Kira noticed how Theron's guard remained constantly alert, their eyes scanning the tree line, their hands never far from their weapons. This was not a leisurely journey, but a military operation, and the tension among the troops was palpable. As afternoon faded toward evening, they reached the eastern border of Blood Moon territory and crossed into the neutral lands that separated the packs. The forest grew denser here, the trees older and more twisted, their branches creating a canopy so thick that little sunlight penetrated to the forest floor. The temperature dropped noticeably, and Kira found herself pressing closer to Theron for warmth. We are close. To Silverwood now, Theron said quietly. Stay alert. The shadow creatures attack near here, and they may still be in the area. As if summoned by his words, a howl split the air, long and mournful and utterly inhuman. Kira felt ice slide down her spine as the sound echoed through the trees, and Tempest shifted nervously beneath them. All around them, the warriors drew weapons and tightened formation. Shadow creatures ahead, one of the scouts reported, riding back at full gallop. At least 10 of them, Your Majesty, gathered around what looks like a ritual circle. They have not attacked yet, but they are aware of our presence. Theron's entire demeanor changed, shifting from the gentle man who had kissed Kira last night to the warrior king who had unified the North. Formation Delta, he commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. Protect the king's companion at all costs. If I give the signal, retreat immediately. I am staying with you, Kira said quickly, feeling him. Prepare to dismount and leave her with the guard. We discussed this. I need to see them. You need to stay alive, Theron countered. But there was resignation in his voice. He knew she would not be swayed. Fine. But you stay on Tempest. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood, Kira agreed, though she had no intention of fleeing and leaving him to face danger alone. The mate bond would not allow it, even if her common sense might have argued otherwise. They moved forward. Slowly, the entire company advancing as one toward the location the scout had indicated. The forest grew darker with each step, the shadows seeming to deepen and pulse with unnatural life. Kira felt the blade at her side grow colder still, until it was like carrying a piece of ice against her ribs. And then they saw them. The shadow creatures were exactly as their name suggested, beings made of darkness and malice given barely corporeal form. They stood in a rough circle around a clearing where symbols had been drawn in what looked disturbingly like blood, their shapes vaguely humanoid but wrong in ways that made Kira's eyes hurt to look at them directly. They had too many limbs. Or not enough. Their faces shifted and changed, never settling into any one form. And their eyes glowed with a sickly green light that spoke of hunger and hatred and ancient evil. The Silver King comes, one of them spoke, its voice a rasping whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. At once. And he brings the Luna's daughter. How thoughtful. The Shadow King will feast on her power when he returns. The Shadow King remains trapped in the void. Theron said, his voice steady despite the tension Kira could feel in his body. He has no power here. No power? The creature that had spoken laughed, a sound like breaking glass. He has enough power to send us. Enough power to thin the veil. Enough power to ensure that when the blood moon rises 3 nights hence, he will walk. This world again. And all your prophecies and pretty Luna queens will not stop him. 3 nights. The words hit Kira like a physical blow. The Shadow King would return in 3 nights, during the blood moon. The prophecy was not some distant future possibility. It was immediate, urgent, and she was nowhere near ready to face it. Kira, Theron said quietly, urgently, do you feel anything from the blade? Any pull or power? Kira focused on the weapon at her side, trying to sense beyond its unnatural cold. And there, beneath the ice, she felt something else. A warmth, faint but growing, like embers being fanned to life. The blade was responding to the shadow creature's presence, responding to her need, responding to the danger that threatened the man she was bonded to. It is warming, she whispered, like it is waking up. Then hold it, Theron commanded. Draw it. Let us see what happens. Kira reached for the blade with trembling hands, the moment her fingers wrapped around the hilt. Power surged through her, stealing her breath and making her vision white out for an instant. When it cleared, the blade was in her hand, and it was glowing. Golden light poured from the runes etched into its surface, light that pushed back the unnatural shadows. Light that made the shadow creatures scream and recoil. No, they shrieked in unison. She cannot wield it yet. She is untrained, unaware. She cannot. And yet she does, Theron said, and there was fierce pride in his voice. He raised his own weapon, a massive sword that gleamed silver in the blade's golden light. Warriors of the North, your king commands you. Destroy these abominations. Send them back to the void where they belong. The battle that followed was chaos. The shadow creatures attacked with inhuman speed and coordination, their forms shifting and darting through the trees. Theron's guard met them with disciplined precision, silver weapons flashing, fire arrows lighting up the darkness. Kira clung to Tempest with her legs, holding the glowing blade aloft, and found that its light acted as both shield and weapon. When shadow creatures tried to approach, the golden radiance pushed them back, burning them like acid. But she could feel the drain on her energy, feel her wolf's power being pulled through the blade and out into the world. She would not be able to maintain this for long. Theron, she gasped, feeling her strength begin to waver. I cannot hold it much longer. You do not need to, Theron replied, cutting down a shadow creature that had gotten too close. You have already done what needed to be done. The blade's light has disrupted their ritual circle, broken whatever spell they were weaving. Fall back. He signaled to his guard, and they began a fighting retreat, moving back toward the main body of warriors while maintaining their defensive formation. The shadow creatures pursued but seemed weakened, their movements slower, their forms less solid. By the time the company had regrouped and the warriors had reformed their lines, the creatures had begun to dissolve, fading back into shadow and mist. The veil pulls us back, one of them hissed as it disappeared. But we have delivered our message. 3 nights, Luna Queen. 3 nights until you face him. And you will fail, as all who came before you failed. Then they were gone, leaving only the echo of their voices and the blood-marked ritual circle as evidence they had ever existed. Kira let the blade dim, felt its power retreat back into dormancy, and nearly collapsed from sudden exhaustion. Theron caught her, supporting her weight with one arm while still holding his sword ready with the other. I have you, he said quietly. You did well, Kira. Better than I dared hope. I did nothing, Kira protested weakly. I just held the blade. You wielded the Blood Moon blade for the first time against shadow creatures and lived to tell about it, Theron countered. That is no small thing. Most who tried to wield weapons of power without proper training died in the attempt. Your blood truly does carry the strength of the ancient line. Around them, the warriors were checking for injuries and securing the perimeter. Miraculously, no one had been seriously hurt, though several bore minor wounds from glancing blows. The shadow creatures had been more interested in delivering their message than in killing, which suggested a level of intelligence and purpose that Kira found deeply disturbing. 3 nights, she said, looking up at Theron. They said the Shadow King returns in 3 nights, during the blood moon. Is that possible? It is more than possible, Gareth said, approaching on foot, his expression grim. It is prophesied. The blood moon is when the veil between worlds is thinnest, when beings of great power can cross from one realm to another. If the Shadow King has been gathering his strength in the void, if his followers have been conducting rituals to weaken the barriers, then, yes, he could return on the blood moon. Then we have 3 nights to prepare, Theron said, his voice hard with determination. 3 nights to ensure Kira can wield the blade with control and purpose, to gather our forces, to be ready for whatever comes. Your Majesty, Lady Seraphina rode forward, and for once her expression seemed genuinely troubled rather than calculated. If I may speak plainly, 3 nights is not enough time to train anyone, let alone someone with no combat experience. Perhaps we should focus on evacuation, on protecting the innocent, rather than putting false hope in a prophecy that may be metaphorical, rather than literal. The prophecy is literal, Theron said flatly. I have seen the texts, studied them for years. Only the Luna Queen can defeat the Shadow King. No one else has the power or the bloodline. Kira is our best chance. Our only chance. Then we are doomed, Seraphina said bluntly. Because that girl, sweet as she may be, is not a warrior. Will die in the first moments of battle, and the Shadow King will feast on her power. The words were harsh, but Kira could not entirely argue with the logic. She had held the blade for perhaps 5 minutes and was already exhausted. How could she hope to face an ancient evil in direct combat? I will train her, a new voice spoke up. An elderly female wolf stepped forward, her hair white as snow, her eyes still sharp and intelligent despite her age. I am Moira, formerly of the Ashford line, now serving as healer to the Silverwood pack. I knew Eleanor Ashford when we were young. I know the old ways, the old training methods. If you give me these 3 days, Your Majesty, I will teach Kira what she needs to know to survive. Theron looked at the old woman with surprise and what might have been hope. You are Ashford? I thought the line was extinct save for Kira. Most believe that, Moira said quietly. I have found it safer to let them continue believing it. But I carry the blood, though diluted through generations. I cannot wield the blade, but I can teach the one who can, if you trust me with her. The offer hung in the air, laden with possibility and risk. Theron looked down at Kira, his expression questioning. It is your choice, he said quietly. I will not force you to train with someone you do not trust. Kira studied Moira, searching for any hint of deception or malice. But the old woman's eyes held only sincerity and a deep sadness, as if she carried burdens that weighed on her soul. And if she truly had known Eleanor, if she carried the same blood, then perhaps she understood what Kira needed in ways that Theron, for all his good intentions, could not. I will train with you, Kira said, her voice stronger than she felt. Teach me what I need to know. Moira nodded, satisfaction flickering across her weathered features. Then we begin tonight. There is no time to waste, and much you must learn before the blood moon rises. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? The Silverwood Packlands were different from Blood Moon territory. Where Blood Moon had been built around displays of power and hierarchy, Silverwood felt more organic, as if the wolves here lived in harmony with the forest, rather than dominating it. The pack's central hall was constructed from living trees that had been shaped and coaxed into formation, rather than cut and nailed together, and the whole place smelled of pine and earth and growing things. Alpha Rowan of Silverwood greeted them personally, a tall woman with silver streaking her dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing to Theron with genuine respect, rather than the obsequious flattery Alpha Aldrich had shown. "Welcome to Silverwood. We are honored by your presence, though I wish it were under better circumstances." "As do I," Theron replied. He gestured to Kira. "This is Kira Ashford, the Luna Queen foretold in prophecy." Rowan's eyes widened fractionally as she looked at Kira, and Kira saw recognition there, and perhaps respect. "Ashford," Rowan murmured. "I did not believe any survived. You have your mother's eyes, child. Eleanor was a friend to our pack once, many years ago." The words brought tears to Kira's eyes, unexpected and unbidden. To hear her mother spoken of with respect and affection, to know that Eleanor had been more than the broken, frightened woman Kira remembered from those final days, was a gift she had not known she needed. "Thank you," Kira said softly. "I did not know my mother had friends outside Bloodmoon." "She had many friends once," Rowan said gently, "before the fear drove us all to hide what we were, who we loved, what we believed. But that is a conversation for another time. You look exhausted, both of you. Let me show you to chambers where you can rest and recover." The chambers they were given were adjacent, connected by a door that could be locked from either side, allowing privacy but also easy access if needed. Theron saw Kira to her door, his hand lingering on her arm. "Moira will come for you soon," he said quietly. "Are you certain you wish to do this? The training will be intense, possibly dangerous." "I am certain of nothing," Kira admitted. "But I know I cannot hide from this. The shadow creatures spoke directly to me, called me Luna Queen as if it were already decided. If I am to face this destiny, I need every advantage I can find. Then I will be nearby," Theron promised. "If you need me for any reason, send word immediately." He kissed her forehead gently, a gesture of affection and protection, then reluctantly withdrew to his own chambers. Kira entered her room and found it comfortable and welcoming, with a fire already burning in the hearth and a tray of food waiting on the table. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, her mind racing with everything that had happened. Shadow, creatures, ancient prophecies, the mate bond with a king, a blade that glowed with power she did not understand. It was too much, too fast, and part of her wanted to curl up and hide from all of it. But she was done hiding. She had been invisible for too long. The knock came just as Kira finished eating. She opened the door to find Moira standing in the corridor, leaning on a gnarled walking stick, but with eyes that gleamed with sharp intelligence. "Ready to begin?" the old woman asked. "Now?" Kira could not keep the surprise from her voice. "I thought we would start tomorrow." "Now," Moira said firmly. "Every moment we waste is a moment closer to the blood moon. Come, we have work to do." She led Kira through the Silverwood compound to a clearing deep in the forest, lit by moonlight and ringed with standing stones that hummed with ancient power. In the center of the clearing was a flat rock that might have been an altar or simply a natural formation, and on it lay an array of items. Herbs and crystals and objects Kira did not recognize. "This is a sacred space," Moira explained as they entered the circle. "It is warded against intrusion and protected by old magic. What we do here will not be observed by curious eyes or hostile forces. It is safe to be honest, to be vulnerable, to fail. I am good at failing," Kira said with bitter humor. "I have been practicing it my whole life." "No," Moira said sharply. "You have been surviving, which is a different thing entirely. Failure is giving up. You have never given up, even when you had every reason to do so. That is strength, child. Do not diminish it." The words struck deeper than Kira expected. She had never thought of her survival as strength before. It had simply been necessity, the only option available. But perhaps Moira was right. Perhaps there was power in endurance, in refusing to break no matter how heavy the weight. "Now," Moira continued, settling herself on one of the stones with surprising grace. "Show me the blade." Kira drew the blood moon blade slowly, watching the moonlight catch on its runes. In the sacred circle, it seemed even more alive, pulsing with a steady rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Good, Moira said, studying the weapon with expert eyes. The blade has awakened to you. That is the first step. But awakening is not the same as mastery. You must learn to control its power rather than letting it control you. Do you know why the blade glowed when you faced the shadow? Creatures? Because they were there? Kira guessed. Because it sensed the danger? Partially, Moira allowed. But primarily because you needed it to. Your fear for Theron, your desperation to protect him, your refusal to be helpless, all of that channeled through your bond with the blade and manifested as light. The blood moon blade responds to emotion, to need, to the wielder's deepest desires and fears. That is both its strength and its danger. How is that dangerous? Kira asked. Uncontrolled emotion leads to uncontrolled power, Moira explained patiently. In battle, in crisis, you must be able to think clearly, to act with purpose rather than reaction. If the blade draws power based only on your fear or anger or desperation, it will drain you dry and leave you vulnerable when you most need strength. You must learn to wield it deliberately, with full awareness and control. How? The question was simple, but Kira suspected the answer would not be. By understanding yourself, Moira said. By knowing your own heart, your own limits, your own truth. The Ashford line has always been marked by this, by the need for absolute self-knowledge as the foundation for power. You cannot control the blade until you can control yourself. She gestured to the altar. Sit. We will begin with meditation, with finding your center. It is not glamorous, and it will not feel like training for battle, but it is essential nonetheless. Kira sat, crossing her legs and placing the blade across her lap. Moira began to chant in a language Kira did not recognize, old words that seemed to make the air itself vibrate. The standing stones began to glow softly, and Kira felt something shift in the atmosphere, as if a door had opened to a space that existed between the physical and spiritual worlds. Close your eyes, Moira instructed. Breathe deeply. Find your wolf. I know she has been silent, but she is there, waiting. Call to her. Kira did as instructed, sinking into the meditation with an ease that surprised her. She had never tried this before, had never thought herself capable of the kind of spiritual work that healers and shamans practiced. But as she breathed and focused, she felt something respond inside her, a presence that was both her and separate from her. Her wolf. The creature lifted its head, and Kira gasped. Her wolf was not the small, weak thing she had always assumed. It was large, powerful, with fur that seemed to shimmer between silver and gold, and eyes that held ancient wisdom. This was not an Omega's wolf. This was something else entirely. What do you see? Moira asked softly. She is beautiful, Kira whispered. Strong. Why have I never felt her like this before? Because you were taught to believe you were weak, Moira said. Because those around you expected weakness, and you unconsciously suppressed your true nature to meet those expectations. But here, in this sacred space, there are no false expectations. Here, you can be who you truly are. Kira reached out mentally to her wolf, and the creature moved closer, pressing its massive head against Kira's spiritual form in a gesture of affection and recognition. I am sorry, Kira told her wolf. I am sorry I ignored you, diminished you, made you small. The wolf made a sound that might have been forgiveness or simply acceptance. Then it did something unexpected. It merged with Kira, not a physical transformation but a spiritual one. And suddenly Kira could feel the world through wolf senses. She could smell the herbs Moira had laid out, could hear Theron's heartbeat from across the compound, could sense the shadow creature's taint lingering at the edges of Silverwood territory. Good, Moira said, and there was approval in her voice. You have found your wolf. Now, While you are merged like this, take up the blade. Let us see how it responds when you wield it as your whole self, rather than as a fractured being. Kira opened her eyes, though she maintained the deep meditation that kept her merged with her wolf. She lifted the blood moon blade, and the moment her fingers wrapped around the hilt, power exploded through her. But this time, it did not overwhelm her. This time, she was strong enough to contain it, to direct it, to shape it according to her will. The blade blazed with golden light, but the light was steady now, controlled, no longer the desperate flare it had been during the shadow creature attack. Runes appeared in the air. Around Kira, glowing symbols that she somehow knew were words of power, ancient protections and blessings left by the first Luna Queen. "Speak them," Moira commanded. "Speak the words your blood remembers." Kira opened her mouth, and words poured out in that ancient language, words she did not consciously know, but that felt right on her tongue. As she spoke, the light from the blade grew brighter, forming a sphere of protection that encompassed the entire clearing. She could feel it, could sense its boundaries and its strength. This was what the blade was meant to do. Not just fight, but protect. Not just wound, but shield. The Luna Queen was not merely a warrior. She was a guardian. When the light finally faded and Kira lowered the blade, she was breathing hard, but not exhausted. Moira was watching her with an expression of satisfaction and something that looked like relief. "You have done in 1 hour what I feared would take days," the old woman said. "Your blood is strong, Kira. Ashford, stronger than any in generations. You may actually survive what is coming." "May," Kira noted wryly, "not will." "I am too old to make promises I cannot keep," Moira said. "But you have a chance now, a real chance. That is more than we had this morning." They trained through the night, Moira pushing Kira to explore different aspects of the blade's power. Kira learned to summon light not just as a sphere, but as weapons, spears of golden radiance that could pierce shadow. She learned to sense darkness gathering, to feel the taint of the Shadow King's influence before it manifested physically. She learned the old fighting forms, movements that had been passed down through the Ashford line for centuries, stances and strikes that felt like coming home. When dawn finally broke, Kira was exhausted in body, but energized in spirit. She had never felt more herself, more whole, than she did in this moment. Moira studied her with eyes that had seen too much and lived too long. "You will do," she said finally. "It is not enough. Will never be enough for what you face. But it is a beginning. Tonight we will train again, and tomorrow night. By the time the blood moon rises, you will be as ready as anyone could be." "Will it be enough?" Kira asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in her chest. "I do not know," Moira admitted. "The prophecy speaks of the Luna Queen defeating the Shadow King, but it does not specify how or at what cost. You may triumph. You may die trying. You may find some third path no one has foreseen. All I can tell you is that you are stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and more important than you understand. The rest is up to fate. And to you." Kira nodded, accepting the honest assessment. She sheathed the blade and allowed Moira to lead her back to the compound as the sun rose fully over the forest. Her body ached. Her mind felt stretched and expanded, and she desperately needed sleep. But beneath the exhaustion, she felt something new growing inside her. Not confidence, exactly, but perhaps the beginning of belief in herself. When she reached her chambers, she found Theron waiting outside her door, his expression worried. "You were gone all night," he said. "I wanted to come find you, but Rowan said Moira's training must not be interrupted." "It is all right," Kira assured him. "I am well. Tired, but well. I learned things, Theron. Important things." He searched her face, and whatever he saw there made some of the tension leave his shoulders. "You look different," he observed. "Stronger somehow." "I feel different," Kira admitted. She hesitated, then made a decision. "Come inside." I want to show you something." They entered her chambers, and Kira drew the blade once more. This time, when she summoned its power, the light came immediately, controlled and steady, forming a protective sphere around them both. Theron's eyes widened with shock and admiration. "Kira, this is incredible. You have more control in one night than I thought possible." "Moira is a good teacher," Kira said, letting the light fade. "And I think, maybe, I am done doubting myself. The blade chose me. My blood carries the power. I cannot change either of those things, so I might as well accept them and learn to use them." Theron reached out and cupped her face gently. "You are magnificent," he said softly. "I knew it from the moment I saw you. But watching you come into your power, seeing you embrace what you are meant to be, it is humbling and inspiring and terrifying all at once." "I am still terrified too," Kira confessed, leaning into his touch. "But I am learning to be terrified and brave at the same time." "That is all any of us can do," Theron said. He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, a kiss that spoke of respect and admiration as much as desire. When they broke apart, Kira felt the mate bond pulse between them, strong and sure. "Sleep," Theron commanded softly. "I will stand guard while you rest. Tonight you train again, and tomorrow night. And then, when the blood moon rises, we will face whatever comes together." "Together," Kira echoed, the word a promise and a comfort. She let him settle her into bed, let exhaustion finally claim her, and dreamed of golden light holding back an endless tide of shadow. The next 2 days passed in a blur of training and preparation. Moira was relentless, pushing Kira to her limits and then beyond, forcing her to find reserves of strength she had not known she possessed. They worked in the sacred circle each night, and during the days, Kira trained in combat with Theron's best warriors, learning to fight with blade and claw, to anticipate attacks and respond with lethal efficiency. Lady Seraphina watched these sessions with an expression that grew increasingly hostile. She had tried multiple times to corner Theron for private conversation, to remind him of the political advantages their match would bring, to suggest that Kira's training was a waste of resources that could be better spent on evacuation and defense. But Theron had been unmoved, his attention and energy focused entirely on ensuring Kira was as prepared as possible for the coming confrontation. On the morning of the third day, the day the blood moon would rise, Kira woke to find Alpha Rowan waiting in her chambers with a package wrapped in soft cloth. "A gift," Rowan said, her expression kind. "From the females of Silverwood. We wanted you to have something that represents not just power, but also the support of those who believe in you." Kira unwrapped the package and gasped. Inside was armor, but unlike any she had seen before, it was made from what looked like silver scales. Lightweight, but incredibly strong, and it had been crafted to fit her perfectly. The breastplate bore the symbol of the moon over crossed blades, and the entire set seemed to glow with a faint inner light. "It is moon-forged armor," Rowan explained, "made by the old methods, blessed by our shamans. It will not stop all injuries, but it will provide protection against both physical and magical attacks. We want you to know, Kira, that regardless of what happens tonight, you have allies. You have pack, even if it is not the pack you were born to." The words made Kira's throat tight with emotion. She had spent so long believing she belonged nowhere, was wanted by no one. But here were wolves who barely knew her, offering support and protection because of what she represented, because of what she was trying to do. "Thank you," she managed. "Thank you for believing in me." "We believe in the prophecy," Rowan said gently. "But more than that, we believe in you. We have watched you train these past days, have seen your determination and your courage. You are worthy of what you carry, Kira Ashford. Do not doubt it." After Rowan left, Kira donned the moon-forged armor, feeling its weight settle comfortably across her shoulders. She strapped the blood moon blade to her side and looked at herself in the mirror. The girl who stared back was unrecognizable from the Omega who had served tables at Blood Moon just days ago. This was a warrior, This was a Luna Queen. The day passed in final preparations. Warriors sharpened weapons and checked armor. Shamans performed rituals of protection and blessing. Scouts reported that shadow creatures were gathering in unprecedented numbers at the border, waiting for moonrise. And through it all, Kira felt the growing pressure of destiny bearing down on her, the weight of all the lives that depended on her success. As evening approached, Theron found her standing alone in the sacred circle, watching the sky begin to darken. "Ready?" he asked quietly, moving to stand beside her. "No," Kira admitted, "but I will do it anyway. That is all anyone can ask." Theron took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I want you to know, Kira, that regardless of what happens tonight, I am proud of you. You have become more than the prophecy demanded, more than anyone expected. You have become yourself, and that is extraordinary. If I die tonight," Kira said, the words escaping before she could stop them, "if this goes wrong and the Shadow King wins, I want you to know that these past few days, knowing you, being claimed by you, becoming your mate, these have been the best days of my life. You made me feel valued and strong and loved. I am grateful for that. You are not going to die," Theron said, fiercely. "I will not allow it. The mate bond will not allow it. We are meant to face this together, and we will emerge victorious." "You cannot know that," Kira said sadly. "I wish I could believe it, but Moira was right. The prophecy speaks of defeating the Shadow King, but it does not promise survival. I might succeed and still die in the attempt." "Then I will die with you," Theron said, his voice absolute. "If you fall, I fall. That is what mates are, Kira. Two halves of one soul. I will not live in a world without you." The declaration was both beautiful and terrible. Kira wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that he needed to live for his people, for the kingdom. But she understood what he meant. If their positions were reversed, if Theron died tonight, she was not certain she could continue either. The mate bond was not just connection. It was completion. They stood together in the failing light. Two people bound by fate and choice, preparing to face an ancient evil that had destroyed civilizations. And despite everything, despite the fear and the doubt and the overwhelming nature of what lay ahead, Kira felt a strange sense of peace. This was her moment. This was what she had been born for. Whatever came next, she would face it as herself, fully and completely. The moon began to rise, and as it cleared the horizon, Kira saw that the prophecy had been literal. It was blood red, the color of old violence and sacrifice, casting an eerie crimson light across the land. And in that light, the shadow creatures appeared. They came in waves, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, more than had been seen in centuries. They flowed across the land like a dark tide, and at their center, a figure began to materialize. Tall and terrible, crowned in shadow, eyes burning with green fire. The Shadow King had returned. Kira felt Theron tense beside her, felt the warriors of Silverwood and the Northern Territories move into formation around them. This was the moment. This was the test. She drew the blood moon blade, and it blazed with golden light so bright it pushed back the crimson moonlight. "Stay close to me," Theron commanded his warriors. "Protect the Luna Queen at all costs. This is what we have prepared for. This is why we are here." The Shadow King's laughter echoed across the battlefield, cold and mocking. "The prophecy repeats itself," his voice boomed, seeming to come from everywhere. "Another Luna Queen, another doomed attempt to defy what cannot be. Stopped. Your predecessor fell before me. Her mate fell. Their entire civilization fell. What makes you think you will fare any better?" "Because I am not alone," Kira said, her voice ringing clear despite her fear. "Because I carry their legacy and their strength. Because I refuse to let their sacrifice be meaningless. And because, unlike them, I know your weakness." The Shadow King paused, his terrible form seeming to focus entirely on Kira. I have no weakness, little Luna. I am eternal. I am inevitable. You are afraid, Kira said, the words coming to her from somewhere deep inside, from the place where her wolf merged with her human consciousness, from the blood memory of queens who had come before. You are afraid of being forgotten. That is why you return. Why you cannot simply stay in the void. You need to be remembered, to be acknowledged, to matter. And that fear makes you vulnerable. The Shadow King roared, and the shadow creatures surged forward. The battle began in earnest. Warriors clashing with creatures of darkness, silver weapons flashing in the blood moon's light. Theron fought at Kira's side, his sword cutting through shadows with lethal precision, his body a shield between her and the worst of the assault. But Kira was not helpless. She wielded the blood moon blade with skill and power, each strike sending shadow creatures screaming back to the void. The golden light that poured from the weapon created a safe zone around her, a bubble of protection, that allowed the warriors nearby to fight without being overwhelmed. Moira's training had prepared her for this, had taught her to channel power without being consumed by it, to fight with purpose and precision, rather than panic and desperation. But the Shadow King was not attacking. He hung back, watching, assessing, waiting for Kira to exhaust herself. He had all the time in the world. She had only tonight, only the duration of the blood moon to end this. I need to get to him, Kira shouted. To Theron over the din of battle. I need to face him directly. That is suicide, Theron yelled back, cutting down 3 shadow creatures in rapid succession. He is too powerful. Even with the blade, you cannot take him alone. I have to try, Kira insisted. This is what the prophecy demands. Luna Queen versus Shadow King. Everything else is just prelude. She saw the conflict in Theron's eyes, saw him torn between his duty as king and his bond as her mate. But in the end, he nodded, accepting her choice even as it terrified him. Then we go together, he said. I will clear the path. You focus on reaching him. They began to move through the battlefield, Theron cutting a swath through the shadow creatures while Kira used the blade's light to push them back. Other warriors fell in around them, forming a wedge that drove toward the Shadow King's position. Lady Seraphina appeared suddenly at Kira's side, her own weapon drawn, her face set in determined lines. I may not like you, Seraphina said tightly, but I will not see the Shadow King win. Whatever our personal issues, they can wait until we survive this night. Thank you, Kira said, meaning it. Even allies of convenience were better than none. They fought their way forward, step by bloody step, until finally they stood before the Shadow King himself. Up close, he was even more terrible, a being of pure malice and ancient power, his form shifting between solid and shadow, his eyes boring into Kira with hatred that transcended time. So, he said, his voice like grinding stone, the last of the Ashford line comes to die before me. How poetic, how inevitable. I am not here to die, Kira said, raising the blood moon blade. I am here to send you back to the void where you belong. You had your chance at this world and lost. You will not have another. Bold words from one so young, so untested. The Shadow King gestured, and shadow tentacles lashed out, faster than Kira could react. But Theron was there, his sword intercepting the attack, his body taking the force of the blow. He grunted in pain, but held his ground, and Kira felt rage surge through her. This creature had threatened her mate, had threatened everyone she was coming to care about, had threatened the future she was only beginning to imagine. The blood moon blade responded to her anger, blazing so bright that even the Shadow King recoiled. And in that moment of weakness, Kira struck. She lunged forward, the blade extended, and drove it into the Shadow King's chest. Where the weapon pierced him, golden light exploded outward, and the Shadow King screamed, a sound of agony and disbelief. But he did not fall. Instead, he grabbed the blade, his shadowy hands wrapping around the metal, despite the burning pain it clearly caused. You think this ends me? He snarled, his face inches from Kira's. "I have survived worse than this. I have endured millennia in the void. Your little blade cannot destroy what has already died and been reborn 1,000 times." Kira felt panic rise as she tried to pull the blade free and found she could not. The Shadow King held it fast, and his other hand reached for her throat. But then she remembered Moira's words. The blade responds to emotion, to need, to the wielder's deepest desires and fears. She stopped pulling. Instead, she pushed. She pushed the blade deeper into the Shadow King's form, and more importantly, she pushed her will, her power, her absolute determination through the blade and into him. The golden light expanded, no longer just surrounding the Shadow King, but invading him, filling him, burning through the shadow that made up his essence. "You want to be remembered?" Kira said through gritted teeth. "Then I will remember you. I will remember you as the fallen king who could not accept defeat. I will remember you as the shadow that was banished by the light. I will remember you, and in my remembering, I will make sure no one ever fears you again. You will be a warning, not a threat, a cautionary tale, not a legend." The Shadow King's screams intensified as the golden light consumed him from within. Around them, the shadow creatures began to dissolve, their connection to their master severing as his power failed. Theron pulled Kira back, creating distance between her and the Shadow King, even as she maintained her grip on the blade. And then, with a final terrible shriek, the Shadow King shattered. His form exploded into 1,000 fragments of shadow that scattered on the wind and dissipated in the blood moon's light. The blade clattered to the ground, its light dimming to a gentle glow. The silence that followed was absolute. Every warrior on the battlefield stood frozen, staring at the place where the Shadow King had been. Then someone howled, a cry of victory and relief, and the sound was taken up by hundreds of throats, a chorus of wolves celebrating the impossible. Kira swayed, exhausted beyond measure, and Theron caught her before she could fall. "You did it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Kira, you did it. He is gone. Truly gone." "Is he?" Kira asked, looking up at the blood moon, which was already beginning to fade to its normal silver. "How can we be certain?" "Because the blade would still be burning if his essence remained," Moira said, appearing beside them with surprising speed for her age. "You did not just banish him, child. You unmade him. By refusing to fear him, by diminishing his importance, you broke the very thing that gave him power. He cannot return now. There is nothing left to return." The weight of those words settled over Kira, and she began to cry. Tears of relief and exhaustion and disbelief that she had actually survived. Theron held her tightly, his own tears dampening her hair, and around them, warriors celebrated and mourned, and began the work of tending the wounded and honoring the fallen. The battle was over. The prophecy was fulfilled. The Luna Queen had defeated the Shadow King, and in doing so, had saved all wolf kind from a darkness that had threatened them for millennia. As the blood moon faded completely, and the normal moon took its place, casting silver light over the battlefield, Kira looked up at Theron and smiled through her tears. "We survived," she said wonderingly. "We actually survived." "We survived," Theron agreed, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "And now we get to live. Together. For all the days the moon goddess grants us." "Together," Kira echoed. And in that word was a promise, a hope, and a future she had never dared to imagine. In the days that followed, as Silverwood and the Northern Territories celebrated their victory, as the dead were honored and the wounded healed, Kira began to understand what her life would become. She was not just the Luna Queen of prophecy anymore. She was Theron's mate, future queen of the Northern Territories, and a symbol of hope for wolves everywhere. Alpha Rowan formally invited her to stay in Silverwood as long as she needed, offering training and support. Moira continued to teach her the old ways, preparing her for the responsibilities that came with her bloodline. And Theron, true to his word, began to court her properly, with gifts and attention and the kind of respect that made Kira's heart full to bursting. Lady Seraphina eventually approached Kira in private, her expression complex. "I underestimated you," she said bluntly. "I saw what I expected to see. An Omega with delusions of grandeur. I did not see your strength or your courage. That was my failure, and I apologize for it." "Thank you," Kira said, surprised by the admission. "That means more than you know." "I am not asking for friendship," Seraphina continued. "We are too different for that, I think. But I am offering respect. You earned it. And if you truly are to be our queen, then I will serve you as I would serve any ruler who has proven themselves worthy." "I would like that," Kira said honestly. "I will need all the allies I can find. This world is new to me, and I have much to learn." Seraphina nodded, something that might have been approval flickering in her eyes, then withdrew with a formal bow that acknowledged Kira's new status. 2 weeks after the battle, as autumn deepened toward winter, Theron asked Kira to walk with him in the Silverwood forest. They moved through the trees in comfortable silence until they reached a clearing where moonlight pooled like liquid silver. "Kira." "Ashford," Theron said, turning to face her and taking both her hands in his. "I have known you for less than a month, and yet I feel as if I have known you for lifetimes. You are my mate, chosen by the moon goddess and fate. But I want more than fate. I want choice. I want you to choose me, not because prophecy demands it, but because your heart desires it." He knelt before her, and Kira's breath caught as she realized what he was doing. "Will you be my queen?" Theron asked, his silver eyes holding hers with absolute sincerity. "Will you stand beside me not as the Luna Queen of prophecy, but as Kira, the woman I love? Will you let me spend my life proving to you every day that you are valued, cherished, and worthy of every good thing this world has to offer?" Kira looked down at him, at this powerful king who had chosen to kneel before her, and felt her heart overflow. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, I will be your queen. Not because of prophecy or duty or fate, but because I choose you. Because you saw me when I was invisible. Because you believed in me when I could not believe in myself. Because when I am with you, I am more myself than I have ever been. Yes, Theron. Always yes." He rose and kissed her, and the moon above them seemed to shine brighter, as if the moon goddess herself was blessing their union. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling, and the future stretched before them bright with possibility. 3 months later, on the winter solstice, Kira Ashford married King Theron of the Northern Territories in a ceremony that brought together wolves from every pack, from every territory, united in celebration of the Luna Queen who had saved them all. She wore white and silver, with the blood moon blade at her side, and her mate's mark proud on her neck. And when the ceremony was complete, when they were declared king and queen before the moon goddess and all the assembled packs, Kira looked out over the gathered wolves and felt something she had never felt before. She felt like she belonged. She felt like she was home. The girl who had once believed herself worthless had become a queen. The Omega who had been invisible had become a beacon of hope. And the woman who had spent her life surviving had finally learned to live. This was not the ending. This was the beginning. And it was glorious.